Okay, can I have your attention, please? We're going to get started because MD PhDs, we always start on time. My name is Mark Eisenberg. I'm the director of the MD PhD program at McGill. I think I'm coming up on my 5th anniversary in December, so this may be my 4th open house, I think, and each year it seems to get bigger and better. So the idea is that we're going to try to convince you to come into the MD PhD program at McGill, and we're going to do that. First, I'm going to give the agenda. I guess you guys don't have the agenda, but the agenda is I'm going to give a 15-minute overview, and then we're going to have our keynote speaker, Dr. Lisanne Khempo. Right here, we'll speak to what is a clinician scientist and why is it such a great career, and is it feasible, and how do you do it? Right? She's a great example of it. Then we're going to bring our students down and have everybody stand up front, and they'll each take a minute to describe themselves because they're at all different levels and they're all coming from different places and studying different things. And then at the end, we're going to have a question-answer session, otherwise known as a free-for-all. And that often deteriorates to people coming down here and mingling with us and asking questions individually. Okay? Are there any questions before we get started? No. Good. Okay. So, I guess, where's Kimberly? Yes. There you are. So Kimberly organized this whole affair. Thank you very much. So I didn't realize until now that there's food and drink upstairs. There are pamphlets about the program at the top, and we have a couple down here. And we have a survey, exit survey we would like you to fill out either electronically or by paper at the end. And you'll have more information about that at the end. Okay, so Open House MD PhD program. So first thing I want to convince you is that Montreal is a great place to train. The MD PhD program is 7 to 8 years. You know, medical school is 4 years, and typically the MD PhD students do either 3 or 4 years of PhD work. So it's usually 4, so usually 8 years in Montreal. So, you know, it's a great city. A lot of you are from Montreal, or you've been studying here, so you know that. I don't have to convince you. Okay, so clinician scientist career, there, you know, probably, I don't know what, Lisanne, maybe 5% of doctors are clinician scientists, 2%? I mean, depends on how you define it, but what we're talking about is people that take care of patients, and they also have a substantial component of research in their careers. So myself, I do probably 50% research and 50% clinical. I'm an interventional cardiologist, so I'm like, you know, 3 o'clock in the morning opening up arteries for people with heart attacks. I put 7 stents in somebody yesterday. But, you know, the other time, you know, I'm running clinical trials, and I have a research team writing papers and grants and books, et cetera. So it's you know, it's a very exciting career. It's not for everybody. So these are the different components. I don't know if is this, oops, sorry. I guess the mouse, where did it happen to Jonathan? Where'd he go? Oh, there it is, there it is. Okay, so, you know, a clinician scientist career has many different components. Typically, there's some administration. Like I'm the director of the MD PhD program, so that's a little bit of administration. Typically, you do less of that when you're starting and try to focus on your research and clinical, but later in your career, you do some administration. There's your clinical activities. That can range anywhere from 20% of your time to 80% of your time. There's some people that do the MD PhD program and then become 100% researchers and don't do any clinical work at all. But most of us are somewhere in between. We're doing both clinical and research. You really have to collaborate. This is not it's not something you can do in isolation. Really have a network of investigators that you work with, you know, in your institution, across Canada, internationally. Really, you know, research is multidisciplinary nowadays. Very difficult to do it just by yourself. Sorry. That is. Management, this is something I didn't realize until I got my first faculty position, but in order to run a lab, you actually have to manage. So I actually interviewed somebody and hired them yesterday. So we don't get a lot of experience doing that as medical students, and it's one of the skills that we try to give you during the MD PhD program, at least sensitize you that there's a whole panoply of skills that you need in order to be a successful clinician scientist that maybe you don't get just going down the clinical path. Mentoring, I mentor the MD PhD students. I in turn am still mentored by other people, including my wife, who's a clinician scientist. I met yesterday over an hour with a new hire at the Jewish General, she's a surgical oncologist who's just starting her career. So mentoring is really important to a career as a physician scientist. Research, of course, that can be anywhere from wet lab, translational, clinical. Can be epidemiology, population research. We have all sorts of different people in the program with all different interests. Teaching is part of what you do. A lot of what I do is teaching at the bedside in the cardiac care unit or in the cardiac catheterization laboratory, but we also teach small group epidemiology, research methods. I have 2 students in my lab every summer who do meta-analyses and do research. So there's a lot of different teaching we do as clinician scientists. And then, of course, you want to balance it with all the other things in your life, including family. So that's a consideration, and maybe Lisanne, I don't know if you're going to talk about that. My wife is a clinician scientist, I'm a clinician scientist. We have 5 kids. It is possible to, do everything, and it's an exciting voyage. Not an easy one, it's not for everybody, but it can be done. Okay, so the MD PhD program at McGill, this is really for people that are interested in a career in academic medicine. It's offered by the Faculty of Medicine and the Graduate and Postdoctoral Studies Office. And as I say, it's a 7 or 8 year program, and typically it's 8 years. For people that are very, very efficient, they can do their research and write up their thesis in 3 years. Most of our students take 4 years to do it. So during the first year of the program, you come in and you do the regular medical student program for the first year and a half. I'll show you in the next slide. So you're going to all the same classes. You have your whole cohort of medical students. At the same time, you're looking around trying to decide what laboratory you're going to do your research in. And there's a variety of bursaries that you can get. You have an opportunity to do research in different labs. Some people have already had experience because they've worked as undergraduates at McGill in a particular lab. They want to stay there. But the idea is that even though you're going to medical school for the first year and a half, you identify what laboratory you're going to do your PhD work in. Okay, so I think that's that. Okay, so this is more of a schematic, which is probably more understandable. So in the orange, you do a year and a half of medical school, just like everybody else. And then in January of the second year, you stop doing your medical studies and you start your PhD. And so in the yellow, you do 3 to 4 years of PhD work. And then in January, you come back and there's transition to clinical practice, and then there's the last 2 years of medical school, which is, those are the clerkship times. That's when you're trying to decide what area of medicine you're going to go into. There's people, our students are still involved in research during that time, but it's really quite difficult during the last 2.5 years. During the first year and a half, when you're a medical student, I think people are pretty active in the labs. In the last 2.5 years, if you haven't submitted your thesis and defended, that's when you're doing that. But you can't do a lot of research during the last 2.5 years. Okay, so research possibilities. Most of the people in the MD PhD programs are doing basic science or translational work, but we do have people doing epidemiology, we have people doing psychiatry research, and we're actively looking for people in other areas, sort of health services research, health economics, could be computer science, whatever area that could be connected to medicine and you can do a PhD would be a possibility for us. And in fact, Kimberly just forwarded me an email, I think a day or two ago, from somebody who was wondering whether you could do a PhD in nursing with the MD, and I said, maybe, I'd have to hear more about it. But we have nurses that come into medicine, and if they want to do a PhD in nursing during that time, I guess it's possible. I would have to hear about it. But we're really quite open as to what area you want to work in. Okay. So, as I say, 7 or 8 year program. What's unique, I think, about the program at McGill, and there's many programs across Canada, but what's unique about our program, and really a strength that I like to emphasize, is we have this evening seminar series that goes on. It's every 2 to 3 weeks during the fall and spring. And it's in the evening. It's at Thompson House, which is the Graduate Student Union, on the top floor, and it's from 6 to 7:30 p.m. And what this is it's an opportunity for people that are interested in research and medicine to get together, and we have our students from all different years are there, and we have a variety of speakers, and what we try to do is have people that are at different stages of their career as clinician scientists talk about their career trajectory, not so much their science, but how they got to where they are, and maybe how you could get to where you want to be. Then we intersperse that with some skill building seminars as well, like how to write grants, what is a grant, how to write a paper, how to letter to the editor, those kinds of things. So I think as we look across Canada, we don't see sort of that kind of it's sort of a combination support group skill building opportunity that we do here. So this is just an example of our seminar, some of our seminars that we had last year. And you can see that it's sort of a mix of people that are talking about their careers and then some of the skill building activities. As part of our skill building activities, we're writing a book as a group. So each student is writing a different chapter about MD-PhD programs. So you guys don't have it yet because it's not been published. We're doing it with Johns Hopkins in the States, Johns Hopkins MD-PhD program. So there's going to be sort of Canadian-American, and it's going to be published by McGraw-Hill in the U.S. Okay, so funding is, I'm not sure the slide clearly points it out, but as an MD PhD student, you get the equivalent of $25,000 a year as a stipend. Okay, so that's approximately $200,000 in an 8-year program. And that's not as much as they get. There's big stipends in the U.S. because there's huge tuitions down there. Out of that stipend, you're expected to pay for your tuition, and then whatever's left over, can be put towards your living expenses. Now, it's not going to pay for everything, but it's a recognition that it's going to take you an extra 4 years to finish medical school compared to your peers, and you're going to be a little bit older. So there's a approximate $25,000 per year stipend. We're staggering it so that it's only going to most of it is only going to start during the PhD period, but the total is the same. So $25,000 a year. Okay. I'm not sure I'm explaining that too well, but it's in transition. There's some summer bursaries to do research, which also come with some funding. And then there's external funding is available. So there's the CHR and FRQS. So for example, there's a Vanier Award, which is $50,000 a year. A number of our students have Vanier Awards. So if you get a $50,000 a year award, we're not going to give you the extra $25,000. McGill's not that generous, but you get to keep the full 50, and you save McGill a little bit of money. Okay, so it's not, you're not going to come out of this program with huge loans owed. Is my point. Okay, so a few benefits of the MD PhD, and our keynote speaker I think is going to speak more to this. But if you're geared towards an academic research career, having a PhD is a major plus. It's going to get you into the top residency, the top fellowship. It's going to get you into the faculty position you want at the location you want. It's very, very difficult to get into the best academic medical centers nowadays. And if you're a proven researcher and excellent clinician with an MD PhD, you have a leg up on a lot of people. I think that the PhD gives you skills to do research that, because when you're applying for grants, you're up against pure PhDs who are doing this full time. So you really need the skills and the knowledge to be able to compete effectively, and that means a PhD. You can do a PhD much later. My wife did a PhD after her fellowship. The thing is, when you do it during medical school, I think that you don't have a lot of extraneous influences. You don't necessarily have a spouse and children and a mortgage and stuff, and you can really focus on the research. And just the last thing I would like to say about that is some people say maybe you shouldn't do your PhD early on because you may do it in neuroscience and end up being an obstetrician. The skills that you're learning are transferable. Really, it's how to identify a problem, how to write up a grant, how to write a paper, how to collect data, how to analyze it. Those are the kinds of skills that you're going to learn as an MD PhD student. So I'm proud of this, so I like to show this all the time. One of our seminars that we do is a letter to the editor seminar. So they work in groups of 2 or 3, and I ask them to identify a journal article that was published in the past 2 weeks, and then get together and write a letter to the editor in an hour and a half, and then at the end of the hour and a half, push the button and send it off to the journal. And this one got into the New England. And in fact, we got another one the following year into New England. And in fact, I think almost everyone in our group has been published, or nearly everyone, in many of these specialty journals like cancer journals, et cetera. In fact, I've gone on now to do this with cardiology fellows, and they've also started getting published. So it's really an opportunity to write a little bit. It's an opportunity to think critically about the literature and to put your thoughts together on paper and to work together as a group. So it's a lot of fun. So, here's my information. If you need to get in touch with me, I'm easy to find on the web. I'd like to thank Kimberly John. Where are you, Kimberly, again? There you are. I don't know if you want to stand up so people can see who you are. Because Kimberly is she's the administrator for the program, and really everything runs through her. She's organized this entire event and evening. If you have any questions about the program, she's the one to go to. I have a research assistant at the Jewish Amir who is not here tonight. He does some of the, I don't know what, more like he's working on the book coordination, that kind of thing. And I have a copy of the book here, I forgot to get it out. So if you want to see it at the end, you can take a look at it. And we have a website. What else? Where's Matt? We have, what else we got here? Where is he? So what else we got? We have a Facebook page. Facebook. Are we on Twitter? No, we're not on Twitter? Not yet. Okay. Good. All right. So here are some pictures from us. I wrote a book on sabbatical 10 years ago. You might want to take a look at it on the web. I think you can see it for free if I'm not mistaken. And it talks about sort of, physician scientist career, what it's like, and some of the different skills you need in order to succeed. So we're probably over already, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know if I should take, well, I can take a couple of questions if there's any at this time. We have any questions? Well, let's, oh, sorry, got a microphone. Okay, good. Okay, go ahead.
Is this working? Okay. So basically, my question had to do with choosing a supervisor.
Yes.
So I think there's like a bullet point about your supervisor having to be in the Faculty of Medicine. Am I mistaken, or?
You need a supervisor at McGill, but we've had a number of people who've done their research at the University of Montreal. So their primary supervisor is over there, but they have a co-supervisor who's at McGill.
Could it be outside of the Faculty of Medicine, but at McGill proper? So like engineering or physics, whatever.
I don't know. But if there was a problem, we would have a co-supervisor, and it would obviate that.
Right. So he could be, in the worst case, be co-supervised.
That's right. So I wouldn't view that as a problem.
Okay. Great.
I mean, if you have a good plan, we're very open.
Okay.
Now it's your job to take that microphone up to, there was a young lady up there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay? We're just going to take a couple questions right now because we have an open session at the end. Yeah, go ahead.
So my question is about international. My question is about the international students. What's the acceptance rates for international students in your program, and also the funding?
Yeah, good question. So we have interviewed international students in the past, but none, at least in the past 5 years, have chosen to come to us. So we're very open to having international students. A lot of the international students that we're interviewing are also interviewing all over the U.S., and they're getting into great programs in the U.S. with these huge stipends. So it's hard for us to compete against that. The stipend is the same. So whether you're from out of province or you're from Quebec or if you're international, the stipend is about $25,000 a year. So that's not, you're not going to have as much money in your pocket at the end as you would if you were a Quebec resident. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, my question is basically who can apply. I've heard that in the previous year it was possible for someone enrolled in the MDCM program to apply at the end of the first year. So can you give us some information about that?
Right, so I meet with the Dean of Medicine about once a year, and he's very strongly supportive of this program. He's guaranteed funding for 5 students a year for the program. We currently have 18 students in the program. When I started, it was 9, so we're up to 18. So theoretically, we would have funding for up to 40 students. But he feels strongly that we have the ability to take people out of the first year of medicine who decide they want to come into research, but they have to have applied to the MD-PhD program in the first place. Okay, so they have to apply to the program. If they don't get in, and they do get into medical school, they could still come back to us and apply to come in. And we've done that a couple times. Okay, but so for somebody who hasn't applied to the MD-PhD program in the first place, they're not eligible. Another question we always get, and I'll answer it now, is if you're already enrolled in a PhD program and you want to come into the MD-PhD program, if you're in your first year of PhD, you can apply. But beyond that, we ask you to finish your PhD, and you're not eligible to come into the program. Okay, let's just take one last question, and then we'll move on. Okay.
I was referring to the website regarding the requirements for the MDCM-PhD. This question is very specific for someone who has an undergrad degree, an international undergrad degree. Do we still have to go through MCAT? The PhD, to get into the MD PhD is like beyond just the MD. So whatever requirements McGill has for MD, you have to fulfill those. And then you have to go on beyond that to apply to the PhD program and get interviewed by us as well. But it's exactly the same as the MD with additional requirements. Okay.
Okay? So Shreya, why don't you take that? We're gonna move on now, and we're gonna have plenty of time for questions at the end. This, I guess, is to remind me to tell, no, this particular slide. That will come. That's coming later. Okay, fine. Okay, so now I want to introduce our keynote speaker, and it's Dr. Lizanne Khempo. And again, I lost your blurb. I've lost her blurb multiple times, but she is she's a clinician scientist. She's an MD PhD. She's at sort of the beginning part of her career. We had her speak at our seminar series last year, and she was excellent. And she's also a surgeon. So I think she's got a lot to tell us, and we're looking forward to it. Okay, thanks. Okay.
Good evening. So the title of my talk is Science for Clinicians, so developing your passion. Dr. Eisenberg gave you a very nice overview of the MDCM-PhD program at McGill. Now I want to give you a personal and candid description of what a clinician scientist is, and also a few things, pearls of wisdom or whatever you want to call it, that I wish I had known before starting my journey into medicine. So, first of all, I was really honored to be invited to give this keynote lecture for you tonight. And I was particularly honored because I did not do the MDCM-PhD program. And the reason I didn't do it is because I was not a candidate. I was pre-med directly from CEGEP, so I couldn't do it. But I remember when I did my MDCM in McGill, and I would work with and rub shoulders with other students that were in the MDCM-PhD program, and looking at them in awe and admiring what they were achieving. And I think that's what pushed me to do my PhD after my residency. Now let's look at the 2 degrees and what the combination of both of them will give you, right? So first of all, the MDCM program at McGill. The medical degree that you'll get at McGill is quite unique. It's going to provide you with the medical knowledge and the clinical skills to pursue your postgraduate residency training. I think the value and worth of a medical degree at McGill is difficult to question, and it carries a lot of weight in terms of opening doors and giving you opportunities. Now, the PhD degree the doctorate degree that you're going to obtain as part of the MDCM-PhD program will give you an advanced research training in whatever focus that you decide to do. So as Dr. Eisenberg mentioned, you can decide to explore whatever branch of medical research passions you. Now, combining both of them, this is where the key is, right? So as mentioned earlier, you get to have 2 degrees in a somewhat accelerated fashion, depending on the progress of your graduate work goes. It will also open up your mind with a different vision of medicine and research together. So this combination of training will make you very distinct from other individuals. As we mentioned, only 2% of physicians in North America are actually physician scientists. Now, that percentages can vary a little bit, but it's quite small. So having this MDCM-PhD program just gives you such a leg up in terms of your career right from the start. So the MDCM-PhD program gives you a lot of advantages. And what I wanted to focus on the advantages of doing your PhD as part of the MDCM. And I can talk about it because I didn't do it, right? So I did it a different way. So what I think it does for you is when you do your PhD portion within your MD degree, it gives you this hiatus in between the classes that you're doing and your clerkship. And it gives, during this hiatus, you have a bit more freedom to manage your time and your experiments between 2 quite stressful periods, right? During your classes, you have very little time to manage you're studying, you're going to classes, and during clerkship, while you're in the hospital, you're working hard. So it gives you this hiatus where you can really think, you can get more experience, you can get more maturity in deciding what you're going to do with the rest of your life. What residency are you going to choose? So it really gives you an advantage as compared to the other MDCM students. And I can say that because I did just the MDCM directly. So it really gives you this advantage. Now, so it allows you to explore your career options before applying to residency. You can do some shadowing. You can do a bunch of different things to really make sure that you're taking the right decision. And as I mentioned earlier, it really gives you this unique perspective on medicine and research. And it really provides you with a much more competitive dossier to apply for residency. Residencies are getting harder and harder to get in, and particularly surgical residency or other very competitive residencies. And so having done an MDCM PhD program it just will make you stand out. I think the reason why I wanted to put together how I got where I am right now. And I think it's a combination of different things. It's a combination of the choices I've made, of hard work, and a lot of it is also luck. I got a scholarship to attend a private CEGEP. So this is where you do your college studies. And I actually wanted to be an orthodontist. Had nothing to do with medicine, right? But that quickly changed. So during my college degree, I realized that medicine was my calling, and I worked really hard, and I got into pre-med. And so getting into pre-med, I had very little knowledge about basic science. I had very little training in that. So I went to McGill Medicine and wound up doing my residency into urology. So I decided to, so during my medical degree, I quickly realized that I wanted to be a surgeon. And I leaned for urology because I liked the look on people's faces when I would tell them I was going to become a urologist. And if you have to think back then, there was really no woman in urology here at McGill. So did my residency. And during residency, I realized that I had a lot of questions that could only be answered with basic science research, and I just wanted to go beyond just doing clinical work. I didn't want to get bored. So I did some basic science research during my residency. It's not the easiest thing because you work hard during residencies, particularly a surgical residency. But that led me to do a PhD in physiology pharmacology at Wake Forest University, North Carolina. Decided to go there because there was this one particular person I wanted to work with who became a mentor, a sponsor, a friend, and so I went to Wake Forest to do this PhD degree. Following this PhD, I did a clinical fellowship in female pelvic medicine and reconstructive surgery at NYU. And finally came back to Montreal to work in the Division of Urology here at McGill. So what do we do? What do clinician scientists do? Well, Dr. Eisenberg has talked already about this, but we usually live in academic centers. So this is where we thrive. This is the environment that we thrive on. So it gives us the best environment to do our research and to do some clinical work. So it allows us to combine both in the most efficient way possible. Most of us actually do translational science, so that means that we do science that will have an impact on health outcomes. Okay, we do a lot of teaching. So I do teaching. I teach medical students. I teach graduate students in my lab. I teach residents. I also teach undergrad. I give physiology lectures to undergrad. And some of us actually win a Nobel Prize. That's not my situation, but actually, quick note: 37% of the Nobel Prize winners in physiology and medicine are actually physician scientists. So you never know, right? So my typical week usually, my brain works better in the morning, so I go to my lab in the morning. This is where I get to sit down with my students, to meet with my research associate, and discuss where we're going. I work on grants, I work on papers, and then usually in the afternoon, I'll go do some clinic, see some patients in the clinic, do some procedures, and usually one day a week, I'll be in the OR all day. So that's my typical week. So it really keeps me on my toes. And some of my colleagues actually are quite envious of this life because they say, oh, I wish I didn't have to see 30 patients a day constantly. You know, it just gives you variety. It just makes you not get bored. And so that's the way I see it. And actually, there was this opinion piece that came out recently that I thought was really timely. And it was written by 3 members of the Physician Scientist Support Foundation. So it seems like we're an endangered species, right? There's actually a Physician Scientist Support Foundation for us. So, and this Robert Lefkowitz is actually a Nobel Prize winner. And so he wrote, "Our world needs a growing corps of professionals who bring a human understanding of patients to medical research and a researcher's expertise to improve patients' lives." So I think this is quite on point with this open house. So now I wanted to talk about a few of the rewards and hurdles or challenges that a physician scientist or surgeon scientist will encounter. So one of the things that I like the most about being a surgeon scientist is that I get to work in a team. Surgeons are usually not solitary people. We just like to be surrounded by other people. And so I like being the leader of a research team. I really enjoy the exchanges that I have with them, not just purely talking about studies or experiments, but just talking about research and science in general. So that's what really gets me up in the morning. So I really enjoy this part. I like the fact that it gives me being a surgeon scientist gives me a unique perspective. I really see it as a two-way street. So being a surgeon, I think, makes me a better scientist because I see patients in the clinic, I see them in the operating room, I know what I need to ask in terms of scientific questions to improve them ultimately. And the other way around. So being a scientist, I think, makes me a better surgeon, better urologist, because when I'm treating a patient, I really understand what's behind this drug that I'm giving them. So it just makes me much more complete. So that's this unique perspective that I was referring to. And you become you become a thought leader in a scientific community. You get to attend conferences, really discuss many different things around science, and I think those are very rewarding parts of my life. And particularly collaborations, and these collaborations go beyond, again, just talking about research and studies. I mean, I've had some friendships that go back many years from these collaborations, and it's really one of the great things that I enjoy about being a clinician scientist, and particularly this freedom that I mentioned earlier, that just purely being a clinician you'll never get. So I think these are the main rewards I would talk about. Now, it's not easy all the time. And I think if it was easy, there wouldn't only be 2% of us. Now, research can be challenging, and I'm sure many of you already do some research. It can be quite thankless at certain times. And so those are some of the hurdles that you might encounter. Grant writing, not usually my favorite time of the day. But it's a necessary evil. You got to do it. And it gets back to the financial constraints. You need money to run a lab. You need some grants in order to also have this protected research time. And so those are very important aspects of running a lab, of being a clinician scientist, but could be the more challenging parts of being a research and scientist. So the title of my talk was Developing Your Passion, right? I don't think you find your passion. I think you find something that you like, something that drives you, something that you're good at, and you develop it, and that becomes your passion. At least that's what happened for me. And you might think, how could she figure out that urology was her passion, right? It's kind of weird. But that's actually meeting other urologists that realize this is what drives me, this is what I'm good at, and this is what I enjoy. And I really built on that. And I narrowed down my expertise along the way. So a few tips that I would give you is when you're choosing your passion, you try to think long term. Just don't try to think just 2 years or 5 years down the line. Try to think, what do I see myself doing when you're 70 years old and doing a vasectomy with shaking hands? So try to think long term. What is sustainable on the long term? And I would also mention, try to diversify. Don't just put all your eggs in one basket. Try to explore different things and see what works for you. These are certain things, as I mentioned, that I wish I had known earlier. Your success and your failures don't define you. And your success, being very successful is not going to bring the most happiness in your life. But some things, one thing that I tried to remind myself all the time, even up to this point, and don't compare your success to other people's success. Everybody has a different journey, but really try to enjoy the journey. And if you're going to do an MDCM-PhD program, it's 8 years, but really try to enjoy every moment. It's not just getting your degree and then moving on. Enjoy the MDCM-PhD program. It's a unique opportunity. It's a unique part of your life you're never going to get back. So I think it's a really wonderful learning opportunity. And this is a quote from Maya Angelou: "Success is liking yourself, liking what you do, and liking how you do it." I wanted to briefly touch on wellness. As Dr. Eisenberg mentions, I think it's really important. And actually, when I did my medical school, it wasn't really part of the portfolio back then. I think it has become much more, and I think it's just really important because being healthcare professional or being doctor, physicians, we're at a really high risk of burnout, and this actually starts very early. Even in your medical school, there is a very high rate of burnout, and there's a lot of external pressure. So I think it's really important early on to put some energy in finding balance in your life during your training and taking care of yourself. Learning to say no. I know it's hard when you're in training and you're being evaluated by other people, but your self-care is actually more important. And consider your lifestyle also when you're choosing your specialty. I would say don't just purely focus on, well, I really like it, but you have to think, am I going to like it when I'm 45 and I have 2 kids at home? I have to think about those things. So I also wanted to talk about mentors and sponsors, and I think that's so important. I wouldn't be where I'm at today, and I'm actually happy where I'm at today in terms of my career, based on the mentors and sponsors. And these are two very different things, but those were the mentors and sponsors I've had in my career is what made me, what's allowed me to get where I am at today. And so I just wanted to talk about a little bit about that. So a mentor provides you a source of guidance and advice. It's maybe a bit more passive in terms of a relationship, while a sponsor is an advocate who champions your work and development. And this little cartoon kind of allows you to see the difference. Now, one is not better than the other. The two are really important, and you might have different mentors during your training. You might have, according to the phase of your training, you might have different mentors for different things. So I have a mentor that, up till now, I still have mentors that help me with certain grant writing. I have a mentor that allows me with, helps me with managing my lab. So those are really key. And usually mentorship, relationship, start off with a connection, with trust, and with friendship, and then they're usually a mentorship relationship that builds. And most of the sponsorship relationship come from mentorship. So it usually, so there's a certain flow between these two relationships, and so those are really important. So a few take-home points. In developing your passion and becoming a clinician scientist is, first off, set your goals, set your realistic goals, and really think long-term, choose for the future. Do what you enjoy, do what you're good at, and try to diversify as much as possible. And again, key, surround yourself with the right people. Seek out people that will support you. Really invest yourself in it, but also reevaluate along the way. It's an 8-year program. Always try to think, what could I do different? But ultimately, just enjoy the journey. So this is my biggest accomplishment, actually. So you can only become truly accomplished at something you love. So again, from Maya Angelou. So I'll take any questions. Any questions?
So just roughly speaking, like how many hours a week do you spend in the lab versus like how many hours you spend seeing patients?
Yeah, so I'm really 50-50, 50% research, 50% clinical, and I'm able to do this. So research doesn't make money usually. Doing clinical work makes money. That we're talking about very, how do you say? Realistic way to look at it. So in order for me to be able to do this, I need to have special grants that allow me to be financially supported during my research time. And wherever you are, there are different grants, whether it's in the US or here, there are different grants for that. So in terms of time, while there's only so many hours in a week, and like I mentioned, how you say, I try to do what I preach. So if I'm saying lifestyle balance, I try to, my family is really important to me. I make sure that I come home at a certain time so that I can spend time with them. But in average, I work about 50 to 60 hours per week. And most of the time, it's more like 50.
Thank you.
How about nights and weekends?
Yeah, one of the benefits of being an academic center is you have residents that work with you, and so they're extremely helpful to help out. But no, nights and weekends, I usually do one night call a week, and I usually do about 4 weekends a year, and I have residents that do a lot of work. Obviously, when I'm on call, they always report to me. I sometimes have to go into the hospital for the more critical cases. But if I wasn't in an academic center, I would probably have to do a lot more calls. I would probably have to work a lot harder in terms of clinical groundwork than I do right now. So I really see it as an advantage, being an academic center from that perspective. Yeah.
What would be something that you would think different between being basic research or clinical research? How would you, like, for example, you set up your first lab. What are one of the first things that you think, for example, as a physician, would be more, if you're clinical, be more case study based? Would you be more the first author? Or if you have a basic lab, would you have more time to manage your students and publish more of a last author?
Well, so I actually do both. I do basic science and clinical. I would say that my forte is probably the basic science because there's not a lot of urologists that do basic science, but I do both. I think one of the points that Dr. Eisenberg mentions that nobody ever really taught me how to manage a lab. And so that's something that I learned I tried to learn during my PhD from my advisor and really try to understand, there's a budget you need to manage. It's not just managing the people, but also the budget. And so that's something I had to learn quickly when I came back on staff here. So I do both. So in clinical research, I think it's easier to publish than in basic science research. So, I have some colleagues. So at this stage of my career, I have over 50 publications. But I see some of my colleagues that do just purely clinical research, and I don't think they spend as much time as I do on research, but they publish a lot more in clinical journals. It's easier. It's easier to pump out some clinical research than in basic science. Basic science, you can work 2 years on one article, right? It all depends on where you're publishing, obviously, and the impact factor and all these things. So that's something just to take in consideration. But when you're applying for grants, those things are taken in consideration. So.
What are some of the researches you are doing right now?
So my focus of interest is the pathophysiology and pharmacology of the urinary tract system. So I focus on overactive bladder and neurogenic bladder. So I look at different targets, pharmacological targets, on how to improve the treatment of these two conditions. So I do a lot of cell culture, animal research, functional assays, ex vivo functional assays to understand these different targets that I'm looking at right now.
Can I link another question to that?
Sure.
And other than the liquid biopsies, or how do the patients feel your research is? What is it that you learn from them?
So when I see patients, so actually my main focus of research when I came back on staff, I developed it when I was doing my clinical fellowship. So when I was seeing patients, I was realizing that a lot of my patients that I was seeing in overactive bladder had metabolic syndrome, and that was really never really looked at before. And so I really developed, so when I came back, I wanted to focus my research on trying to link and understand how metabolic syndrome was causing overactive bladder in patients. And so it's actually become my niche of research in the last few years. And a lot of people started looking at it later on also. And so, when I see patients in the clinic and I realize, well, this is their presentation, it allows me to understand a little bit more the condition and how I can ask different questions in the clinic, in the lab.
Thank you.
A pleasure.
Okay, any other questions?
Good.
Okay, Lisa, that was terrific. Thanks very much. Okay, so we're moving on to the students panel. So we're going to ask all of our current students to come up front with microphones.
There's a handheld microphone that's
Let's see, right here. Is that on? Yep. Okay, so everybody line up. Yeah, I'll just give it. Okay, so the plan is each person is going to spend a minute or less just telling who they are and where they are in the program and what they're studying or what they hope to accomplish. And we'll buzz through that, and then after that we'll take questions. Okay? So we'll start with Shreya. Go ahead.
Okay, so hi. Here? It's on? Great. Okay, so hi, I'm Shreya. I'm in the 5th year of the program, And like Dr. Khempo mentioned, I don't know where the time went. So it's been amazing. I did my undergrad in neuroscience at the University of Toronto, and then came here to start in the MD-PhD program at McGill. I'm doing my PhD in the lab of Dr. Nada Jabado. She's a pediatric neuro-oncologist, and so we study pediatric brain tumors, specifically a really aggressive kind. And we use a whole range of different techniques and technologies, everything from gene editing to next-generation sequencing. It's to try and uncover the mechanisms, the genetic mechanisms behind these, the development of these tumors. And other than that, I love being in the lab. I also love being in this program. This is kind of my second family away from the lab. They're my colleagues, but also my friends. And it's a great program to be in. You get to combine your love for medicine with your love for research if you are truly passionate about research. And yeah, that's kind of me.
That was awesome. So, hey, my name is Steph. I am in the same year of the program as Shreya, so 5th year. So going to be wrapping up my PhD next year. I am working in Josie Ursini-Siegel's lab at the LDI. And so that's affiliated with the Jewish General Hospital. And we are looking at breast cancer metabolism. So very broad field. But yeah, aside from that, the program, I think Shreya really covered it pretty well. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to reach out or come talk to us at the end. Thanks.
I'm Matt. I'm also a 5th-year student in the program, like these guys and some of them. I'm a Montrealer. I grew up in the West Island of Montreal. I went to John Abbott for CEGEP, like I'm sure some of you guys did. I went to McGill in anatomy and cell biology for my undergrad, and now I'm in the MD-PhD program. And my research is based at the Goodman Cancer Center, which is the glass building, like basically right attached to this one. And I work in Peter Siegel's lab, who's the husband of Steph's supervisor. And the main focus of our lab is studying how cancer spreads or metastasizes. And my work in particular is basically focused on how cancer goes specifically to the brain. And we use many cell models, mouse models, and patient specimens to find a combination of treatments and different pharmacological treatments and other types of treatments to understand and also benefit the actual patients that are afflicted with this. And I love the program. You can see my smiling face on the brochure. That's proof.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm in the 2nd year of the program. So I'm going to be starting my PhD in January. I did an undergrad in molecular biology at the University of Sherbrooke. And I'm going to be doing my PhD at the MNI in neuroscience. And my project is not really perfectly defined, but I'm going to be working with stem cells to make muscle cells and motor neurons to model ALS. And use culture systems to study neurodegenerative disease. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Dominique. So I'm from Montreal, and I did my undergrad at the University of Montreal in biomedical sciences. Then I had started a master's in genetics, and now I'm in my 2nd year of the program with Sarah. So I'm going to be starting my PhD as well next January. I'll be working in the field of ophthalmology, so I'll be doing a co-supervision, like I think you referred to. So I'm going to be working with Dr. Kounikoop, who's here, and with Dr. DiPolo at University of Montreal, and with another clinician at University of Montreal. And so we're looking at glaucoma mechanisms and development after corneal transplantation and understanding how this happens after surgery and how we can save patients from developing that condition, which is life-threatening, well, not life-threatening, but vision-threatening, and which arises in the vast majority of patients that are operated, and the surgery would be otherwise successful. So we're looking into the mechanisms and how to target it and how to treat it.
Hi. Hello. All right. So I'm Guido. I'm a 5th-year student, so along with the other people to my right. Sorry? Yeah, and I don't know why. We should have been all the 50 years together. My research, so I work at the Montreal Neurological Institute, but I'm actually co-supervised by somebody at the University of Montreal and by somebody at the University of Sherbrooke. So you can do it if you look for the right people. And my research consists in using magnetic resonance imaging to study the impact that concussions have on the brain of children, as well as the link between concussions and aggressive criminal behavior. And in addition to that, Mark said that if you're in the program, you don't have to worry about mortgages or children. But I have a daughter and I have a mortgage, so I would be happy to provide my perspective on anything, including work-life balance. Thank you.
I'm Heather. I think I also feature in the brochure. You may have seen my face before. Story is I'm an out-of-province student, so I started in Winnipeg. That's where undergrad was, in something called biopsychology. I think it's now called neuroscience. Did a quick master's in England, and I'm here now. So I'm also co-supervised. I'm half by a basic scientist at the Neuro, and half by a neurologist. So my PhD project is sort of purposed to bring together the research happening in this basic lab with a potential clinical application. I'm in a music lab, which is a lot of fun, playing around with brain stimulation and seeing if we can boost some brain systems involved with memory that could be useful for patients with neurocognitive dysfunction and HIV. Having a great time.
My name's Mac. I started in the same year as Heather. I'm originally from Vancouver Island, but I've been in Montreal now for almost 10 years. So I started in 2008 in anatomy and cell bio. I knew Matt back then, and I was Matt's TA for a minute. I did a master's here as well, working at the Neuro, working on glial biology. And then I went down to Boston and worked in a biotech for 2 years and worked on synapse biology in the context of Alzheimer's. And now I'm back at McGill and going the long haul. So I'm working with a pediatric neurologist, and what I study is a rare form of a leukodystrophy. And basically, in a nutshell, we're designing gene therapy for that. And so I'm early on. I'm just started my third year. Having a lot of fun and hoping that it turns out. So I'll let you know.
Hi everyone, I'm John. I'm originally from Toronto. I did my undergrad at the University of Toronto in pathobiology and immunology. I became interested in the idea of pursuing a career as a clinician scientist when my dad was diagnosed and ultimately passed away from pancreatic cancer. So I looked for opportunities on how to learn more about this disease. For my master's, I worked with Steve Gallinger, who's a pancreatic surgeon. We really looked at the immune system and how it plays a role in pancreatic cancer. I wanted for my medical training to pick an institution that has both a good medical faculty and a good graduate school, so McGill was a natural choice. And on top of that, there was a frequent collaborator that we worked with, George Zagopoulos, who's also a pancreatic surgeon here. So I'll be doing my PhD with him, and we'll be trying to look at in vivo models on how to investigate the immune system and how it plays a role in pancreatic cancer.
Hi everyone, my name is Mark. I was born and raised in Montreal. I went to Marianopolis CEGEP, and then I did an undergrad in pharmacology here at McGill. I still have a year to decide on a PhD supervisor, so I'm not sure yet. I'm interested in respiratory research, and I'd also be happy to answer any questions regarding applications. If you want to chat after, you can come find me. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Owen. I'm originally from Vancouver, but I've actually been in Montreal for 7 years now, and I'll be here for another 8 years. So I did both my bachelor's and master's at McGill. With my master's, I did my research with Dr. Jose Diodoro in cancer research. He's a very basic cell cancer biologist, but we work closely with a clinician scientist, Dr. William Folks, and my research is to figure out so first of all, we looked at mutations found in ovarian germ cell tumor patients, and we're trying to characterize that in mouse models.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah. I am a first-year student here. I am originally from Ottawa, though I did my undergraduate degree in life sciences at Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario. I stuck around at Queen's and did my master's at Queen's in pathology and molecular medicine, specializing in cancer research. So I'm in the same position as Mark, where since I'm in the first year of the program, I'm taking that year to kind of hunt around for a PhD supervisor, looking to stay in the cancer field, coming from a very basic science and cell signaling background. But if anyone has any questions about being an out-of-province student, I'd be happy to answer those.
Great. So my name's Matt. I'm also a first-year student, so I think all the first years have kind of stuck to the left here. So a little bit about me. I was born and raised in Ontario. I did an undergraduate degree in psychology and chemistry. I then wasn't sure what I really wanted to do, either medicine or research after that, so I worked for a year in mental health, and then I went into sort of an insurance job for a little bit there. Seems unrelated, but it all sort of comes together in the end. I then decided to do a master's, also in Ontario. I was looking at traumatic brain injury and how sort of concussive injuries can predispose people to developing neurodegenerative conditions, such as Alzheimer's disease. And I had a really influential supervisor there who reminded me that I don't need to choose between either doing research or sort of pursuing a career in medicine. So I came here. I'm in my first year, as mentioned, and I'm really excited for what's to come. So I'll be happy to answer any questions as well. Thanks.
So, do we have? We're going to take some questions now, if anybody has. Are there any? Yeah.
Yes. Can you talk about the application process?
Yeah, we do.
Oh, I'll do it.
Does this one work? This one? Okay.
Yeah, I had a question about the application process and what makes your application stand out, like MCAT, volunteering, and all of that stuff.
So can you repeat that again?
Okay.
A little louder.
Yeah, I'm asking about the application process and what makes your application stand out. Yeah.
So I'm not sure I'm the best person to answer that because I never would have gotten into this program. But I mentioned that earlier. But it really, it is a combined program. But to get in, you've got to do the whole medical school application. So whatever McGill requires to get into medical school, you've got to do that. On top of that, for our application, you have to, there's a little essay about, we want to hear about your commitment to research, your experience with research. We ask for a couple letters of reference from research supervisors on top of that. So, if you make it all the way through to the interview, which is the MMIs, I don't know if you know, if you make it to the interviews, then we have our interview in the afternoon. Okay, and our interview is very relaxed.
More so.
Our interview, what we've been doing is I've actually asked each student to come with 2 slides. One slide to tell about themselves, with their family and their pets, and the other is to talk about their research. And then we have a group of, we have a program advisory committee. I didn't mention that. Lisanne is on that program advisory committee. So we have individuals sitting around a table ask questions. Really, we're looking for, commitment to research. Somebody who's going to go the mile. I mean, the program is really intended to turn out people that are going to end up having research as a significant component of their career. In terms of what would make your application stand out, I don't know if you guys have any. That's right. We're writing a book, right? So we have a book, and I'll have it up here afterwards. You can look at. I don't know. Is it really? Nobody has anything to say about that? What would make your application stand out? What would make your application stand out for a medical school or for the program? Go ahead.
I think when you listen, and I have the benefit of hearing from these guys all the time, but when you listen to everybody give their little sort of elevator pitch about their work, you notice that everybody's sort of got something a little bit unique about what they're doing. And so when you develop your narrative for an application, you really want to make sure that you capitalize on what makes you unique. It's not necessarily, everybody's going to have a great application, right? You're going to be up against great people. What you need to do is make sure that you really play your strengths and what makes you different. And I know that doesn't seem like it's very specific advice, but when you look at each one of us, there's definitely something different, right, from all of the rest. And you have to figure out what that is and make it sound great.
I just want to add to that, the narrative part. I think if you can tell a story through your application and the thought process, why you want to do this, and just your life story in a cohesive way, it would go a long way in your application as well.
It's obvious, but I think also making sure that you don't just focus on the medical part and not just on the research part. It's really like a whole, and you have to show that you've kind of worked on both in your life and that you want both equally, right? Because it's a very specific program and it's very demanding, but it combines both. So that's something to keep in mind if you're applying to the MDCM-PhD program. You really want to do 50-50. So try to orient your narrative and your CV and how you talk about your life in that sense.
Any other questions?
So I just wanted to ask if having a master's is considered a plus when it comes to applying, or does having an undergrad with significant research background enough to permit you to apply to the program?
Guys, raise your hand if you have a master's. 50-50, approximately. So I guess it helps. But also definitely doesn't disqualify you if you don't have a master's. Far from. If you're an undergrad with a significant track record of research, you're in a great position to be able to get into the program. You want to add?
Yeah. Hi. I just wanted to ask, how did you go about choosing your lab, whether it be basic science versus clinical science, and whether there's kind of an advantage in choosing a lab that's more clinically related since you can apply the knowledge of your first year of medicine?
So I don't know. I think it really depends on what your interests are. If your interests are more towards the clinical side, by all means, seek out a supervisor who does research in that arena. On the other hand, I think it's a matter of trial and error. You need to go out and try. And the nice thing about the program is that it allows you the freedom in that first year and year and a half or so of medical school to really go out and try a bunch of different labs. And most supervisors are incredibly welcoming to MD-PhD students in particular. So, just try it out. If you like a basic science kind of environment, then do your PhD in that. I think one of the things that, 8 years seems like a long time, but in the span of our lifespan, it's really not that much. So if you're doing something that you love, and trust me, during your PhD, you need to be doing something that will get you up in the morning and get you going on a weekend, on a Sunday, like, 11 p.m., something that's going to get you to the lab. You want to be doing something that you care about, so it doesn't matter what the research is, as long as it has some kind of clinical application, but you can really, extend that considerably.
Also, if I can add something to that, sometimes, depending on what you want to do, you might not find a single person that can offer everything. So there's definitely a possibility for you to reach out, as I did. I was finding out after my first year that neither of my two supervisors could offer exactly what I wanted, so I reached out to a third person. You can certainly do that. In fact, it's your responsibility as a future researcher to seek out these collaborations, and I think doing your PhD is a good way to do that.
Yeah. You might think that you were referring to doing clinical research versus basic science research, and you might think that doing clinical research might go quicker, right, than basic science research, especially if you're limited in time in this program. But I think most of us do basic science research, and if I speak for myself, I try to orient myself towards clinical research, but then I'm still back in basic science research because that's what I know. And at some point, it's my comfort zone, but I chose a completely different field. So there's always a way to combine the different factors, the new factors and the factors with which you're comfortable with. And I think choosing your supervisors accordingly to make it the best and exactly what you want out of your PhD is the key. So combining clinical with PhD only, with MD PhD supervisors, I think all of that together makes it a unique combination, and then you can have both at the same time if that's what you really want. So possibilities are endless, really.
So I was wondering, according to McGill, if you're a resident of Canada, you don't need to take the MCAT. So I was wondering how many of you guys took the MCAT to get into this program? And also on the administration side, do you look at the MCAT score if you're trying to accept them for their PhD as well?
Do you want to speak to the
administrative?
Yeah, I think administrative and maybe the newer students could, because my MCAT is outdated.
So again, the PhD, we're like the PhD part. So there's a whole med school admissions that's not here tonight. Oh, you want to speak to that? But we do not look at the MCAT, okay? But McGill.
Obtained your bachelor's degree outside of Canada, you need to do your MCAT.
So what if you did your undergrad in the US and then you do your master's?
Undergrad in the US, I think you still have to do the MCAT. It's outside of Canada, so. It's because it's your bachelor's degree. That's the basis of admission degree, yeah.
Other questions? We're gonna break this up in about a minute, and people are gonna come down for more questions, so other people can go home if they want. Okay, go ahead.
So my question is, like, by the end of the program, the MD PhD program, would you necessarily be committing yourself to academia? Like, let's say, like, as an undergrad, I see that as nice, but maybe by like your 7th year, you'd realize that academia is not necessarily for you. So my question is that would there still be some sort of flexibility towards the end of your program if you want to, let's say, like, commit to like clinical work 100%, or?
So a few years back, we surveyed all of our alumni, basically that have graduated from the program since, I guess, the 70s all the way until a couple years ago, to see where they wound up and what they're doing now after completing the MD PhD program. And it's actually quite a mixed bag in terms of what people are doing. There are many of them which are, fulfilling what we describe as like the classic MD PhD path, that are clinician scientists that have research groups and grants and all that. But there is another large group of graduates that either are not actually doing research at all, or are more collaborators in research that are definitely still involved in research but aren't PIs themselves. So there definitely still is that flexibility. And even in these surveys, a lot of those people that did the MD PhD program that aren't actively running research labs still value the research experience, because it really, for them at least, changed the way they thought about medicine and the biology underlying the diseases that they're treating and things like that. So yeah, to answer your question, there's still plenty of flexibility, but the goal is ultimately to be doing research. But you could, if you don't have to. No one's forcing you to do anything, really.
Any last question?
Hi, I'm just wondering, like, what else except like the regular stuff you need for MD and research? What else do you need for MD PhD program? Is that just it, or just this? Not a good word, but is there anything else?
Go ahead.
I don't know, but I'm willing to guess maybe a certain level of maturity. I mean, you are committing yourself for 7 to 8 years, so, and you're being paid, as long as you don't do weird things with the money. But you need to at least, I think that you need to show that you know what you're getting yourself into. So a certain level of maturity is certainly important.
Thank you.
I'm going to wrap this up.
So I think we're passing around some exit surveys. We'd appreciate it if you could fill it out, because we're sort of like to know who you guys are, and if we are, are you the, are we telling you what you need to know? Are there other things that we're not telling you? There's also opportunity to do this electronically on the web. But there's one last point I'd like to make. We didn't bring it up, but we actually have some francophones in the program. I think you two ladies are the first two in many, many years. So are there any francophones here? Aha. Okay. So maybe you want to speak to them a little bit about being francophone.
In French?
No, in French, but also being a francophone at McGill.
OK. Sarah, tu peux pitcher aussi, si tu veux.
Allez-y.
OK. Bonjour. Je ne sais pas si vous venez de l'Université de Montréal ou de l'Université de Sherbrooke comme Sarah ou d'ailleurs, de l'Université Laval. C'est sûr que c'est un plaisir pour nous de vous avoir. Ça apporte de la diversité. Puis, on ne se sent pas à la maison à McGill. Il y a pas de, je pense pas que c'est pas une ambiance qu'on ressent nécessairement. Tout le monde est bilingue, trilingue, quadrilingue. Donc, que ce soit le français, l'espagnol ou d'autres affaires, rendu là, ça fait plus de différence vraiment. On est très accueillants. Puis, plusieurs personnes sont bilingues, justement. Vous avez la possibilité de faire vos examens en français si ça vous accommode davantage. Et puis, en termes de recherche, c'est sûr que vous pouvez choisir des superviseurs qui sont bilingues ou juste francophones. Puis, via des co-supervisions, que ce soit à l'Université de Montréal, comme on a ici, ou ailleurs, il y a toujours moyen d'avoir cette espèce de confort-là si ça vous convient davantage à vous. En termes de français, c'est la seule université qui offre le programme MD-PhD dès l'entrée dans le programme directement. Donc, je sais que l'Université de Montréal, si jamais vous appliquez aussi en médecine à l'Université de Montréal, ils offrent le programme PhD et MD comme un add-on, un petit ajout au fil du parcours. Mais vous n'avez pas de compensation financière, puis vous n'avez pas l'honneur et le prestige qui va avec. Donc, c'est unique à McGill. C'est typique de McGill d'offrir ce programme-là avec cette compensation financière-là, ce soutien financier-là, qui fait une énorme différence quand on y pense bien. Là, ça sauve plusieurs années de dette. Et puis, c'est quelque chose de très prestigieux et c'est honorifique pour nous de rentrer. Puis, je pense que c'est assez unanime que je parle en anglais ou pas. Je pense que c'est un mot assez universel. Donc, je pense que c'est ça. On se sent chanceux, puis on se sent à la maison, puis on est à Montréal, donc il n'y a pas ça continue, puis vous avez des anciens comme nous qui viennent de l'Université de Montréal ou de l'Université de Sherbrooke, puis on est francophones. Puis dans la classe en médecine avec qui vous allez être et avec qui vous allez retourner après votre PhD, il va y avoir énormément de francophones aussi. Moi, je dirais 50% ou plus. Fait que je vais laisser Sarah continuer pour pas lui
c'est à peu près ça que je m'en allais dire. Moi, j'avais peur quand arrivant à McGill, c'était une de mes craintes de moins me faire d'amis à cause de la barrière de la langue. Puis je me suis rendu compte assez rapidement dans la classe que 50% des gens, en fait, sont francophones puis ils viennent à McGill. Oui, pour le prestige, oui, mais moi, c'était vraiment important pour moi de faire ma médecine en anglais aussi, ma science en anglais, parce que les présentations, l'anglais, c'est la langue de la science. Donc, pour moi, ça n'a vraiment pas été une barrière, puis je trouve que c'est une grande richesse d'avoir cette opportunité-là. Puis, je pense que tu as tout volé ce que je voulais dire. Mais si vous avez des questions, n'hésitez pas à venir nous parler tantôt. Ça va nous faire plaisir de répondre à vos questions.
So, thank you guys. We're going to invite people to come down now and ask us questions personally. Is that maybe you want to stay for a minute or two if people want to ask you about, urological surgery? Okay? Thanks all for coming, and please fill out the surveys.